Thanks, Jen. Two questions. First, after the Rome meeting, since the war began, has China provided any military or economic aid to Russia or expressed any specific intentions to do so?
I'm not in a position to confirm or detail any intelligence from here at this point in time.
And to follow up on the Rome meeting, what are the consequences for China if they do aid Russia?
Well, I'm not going to get into specific consequences. I think what we have conveyed and what was conveyed by our national security advisor in this meeting is that should they provide military or other assistance that, of course, violates sanctions or supports the war effort, that there will be significant consequences. But in terms of what those specifics look like, we would coordinate with our partners and allies to make that determination.
Okay. But Jake Sullivan certainly communicated that there would be consequences.
Yes, as we have also said publicly a number of times.
Back on the Rome talks, have you seen any, or did your colleagues see in this meeting, any sign that China got the message that they are going to heed your warnings?
Well, what we're going to be watching closely, of course, is actions. So beyond that, I think as my colleagues just read out for you in a call that we delayed the briefing slightly to make sure you could all participate in, it was an intense 7-hour session reflecting the gravity of the moment. And it was an opportunity to be very clear about what you've heard our National Security Advisor convey publicly, but more directly about what the consequences would be.
And your colleagues have said that your deep concerns were conveyed about what would happen if China were to align more closely with Russia. Just big picture, if China does not heed the U.S.'s warnings, if they do move forward with this, how concerned are you that this is inching closer to the world war that the president has been warning of?
Well, I think what we're looking at here, one is if China were to decide to be an economic provider or to take additional steps there to Russia, they only make up 15% or 15 to 20% of the world's economy. The G7 countries make up more than 50%. So there are a range of tools at our disposal in coordination with our European partners, should we need to use them. But again, we don't have anything to update you on in terms of an assessment. This is obviously an area we're watching closely. While this meeting has been planned for some time as a follow-up from the November call that the president had with President Xi, it was a timely and important moment to have this conversation, especially given the reports we've seen and the invasion, of course, of Ukraine.
So when you talk about kind of the possibilities for China if they don't go along with what you've asked, would you say, like you've said with Russia, that everything is on the table, including ending trade negotiations, sanctions? Is that all on the table?
I'm just not going to be in a position to detail it further from here. We'll see. We'll keep having this conversation over the coming days.
But you won't do nothing if China decides to provide military
We've been clear
support
there would be consequences.
that you all would initiate.
Yes.
Okay, and then what's kind of your thinking about what an end game looks like as far as these conversations with China? Do you want them to shift their strategic priorities and not have a relationship with Russia that it does now, or are you looking for something more modest?
Less about changing their mind and more about making clear with them what the consequences would be should they take additional actions to support this invasion.
Do you get a sense that as this conflict with Russia and Ukraine is happening, that other actors that are adversaries to the United States, China, Iran, North Korea, are also testing the West with China's work with Russia as you're dealing with that, perhaps with Taiwan, Iran with its rockets, North Korea also showing its provocative nature. Is there a test of the West coming from some of the adversaries of the United States? We have not assessed those to be related, as you have said. I mean, if you look at the missile strike that we saw over the weekend, no U.S. facilities were hit, no personnel were harmed. We were not the targets of that. We've obviously seen tests and information we put out publicly as it relates to North Korea. We've seen dozens of tests over the course of past administrations as well. So I would say we are not assessing it through that prism.
On Ukraine, the president has made clear that he sort of has a red line with Russia in terms of not wanting to do anything that would get into a direct confrontation or lead to World War III, as he puts it. I'm curious, and you're not sharing specifics, but in broad strokes, does he have a similar red line now with China assisting Russia? And does he not want to get into a direct confrontation with China? And are there certain things he's not willing to do because of that?
Let me see if I can answer your question, but tell me if I'm not. We don't like red lines around here, so I'm not going to use that phrasing. But you are obviously correct that he's been very clear and consistent about that he does not have the intention of sending U.S. troops to Ukraine. That has not changed. I would look at, while we are certainly watching closely the actions of China, whether that is support of any kind, in support of any kind for Russia, and certainly there would be consequences to that. I do think we look at it through a slightly different prism. I mean, Russia is invading Ukraine actively, so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not.
Sort of, just to follow up, I mean, right, no ground troops in Ukraine, but also there have been other things such as not enforcing a no-fly zone or not providing the fighter jets that the president has been reluctant to do. So again, you said you're not sure in specifics. You said, Jake Sullivan said significant consequences for the Chinese, but I'm wondering if there are certain things that you will not consider because it could lead to a direct confrontation with China that you're reluctant to get into, the same way you are with Russia.
I just think we look at it slightly differently. I mean, why the president has been so clear about not sending U.S. troops is obviously because that would be a military conflict. We're not fighting, obviously, there's no military conflict at this moment with China, nor are we predicting that. So I think it's slightly different.
Japan and some of the other treaty countries are increasingly alarmed after Afghanistan and this recent situation. Could you let the Japanese government know that the security treaty will be honored? And then second, for those of us that were embedded during the war, the whole situation with Afghanistan is quite personal. There's a large number of our people that helped us that are still left. Could you just update us on almost 6 months whether they'll be able to come back?
Well, I would say on the second part, that is one of the reasons that we've worked so closely with our Qataris to maintain a diplomatic presence there so that we continue to engage with neighboring countries to bring people home and help some of our partners and allies who stood by our side, fought by our side over the course of the 20-year war. That's ongoing. In terms of the numbers, I would point you to the State Department who would have the most up-to-date numbers. I'm not sure I understand your first question.
Just a reassurance to Japan and a lot of the countries that have treaties with us that are worried, if a situation like this develops, if those treaties are going to be honored.
Which situation? How would it relate to Japan?
Well, Afghanistan is long partners of ours, and so the whole situation that's happening now, Taiwan, there's a great concern that if you have a treaty and it comes to a difficult situation, whether it's really going to be honored.
We've never stepped back from the commitments we've made under the Taiwan Relations Act, and the President stands by those.
How is the administration preparing to respond to the potential supply chain shock, posed by China's decision to lock down the tech production hub in Shenzhen?
So we are, of course, monitoring this incredibly closely, and our team is quite focused on it. What I will say is that because of the steps we've taken and a number of steps we've taken to better prepare and strengthen the supply chain, we feel that that has helped us, will help us sustain. But in terms of right now, we're basically in the stage where we're monitoring with the State Department. What we're looking at is, of course, as you know, the impact on some of these ports around where the impacted areas of China. And we know here that, of course, our port action plan and the work of our supply chain disruptions task force, that we have a strong inventory that we can rely on. It's about 90% of goods at groceries and drugstores are in stock currently. And we've also reduced the number of import containers sitting at the docks for over 9 days by over 60%. But in terms of specific impacts of ports in China, we're monitoring it, and we don't have a new assessment at this, an up-to-date assessment, I should say, at this point in time.